Hi everyone, Elsie Jensen here. Today we are going to make some homemade sourdough biscuits, fry up some chicken for some chicken and biscuits, and then we are going to prep up some yeast roll or sourdough rolls with a touch of yeast for dinner tonight, and whip up a fruit salad. So let's start by getting our biscuits ready so we can pop those in the oven. So we're going to start with our dry mix because we've got to cut some butter into it. So we are going to use our all-purpose flour here. We're going to use 2 cups, 1 and 2 of all-purpose flour. No bread flour, no self-rising. It's got to be all-purpose. I'll move this over here because this is going to be for our chicken in a little bit. And we are going to add in about 1/2 teaspoon of salt. And now we are going to put in our baking powder. We're going to use 1 tablespoon of baking powder, and then we'll use 1/4 teaspoon of baking soda. So you want a big honking tablespoon of baking powder. Don't get those mixed up because then you'll have a very bitter biscuit and they will be very, very big. And then 1/4 teaspoon of baking soda. And then I'm going to give this a nice little stir here. I'm just using my biscuit cutter to kind of mix it up. And then we're going to use a whole stick, so 1/2 cup of cold butter. So I took this just out of the fridge. It needs to be cold, not room temperature, because if you want flaky layers in your biscuits, the cold butter's where it's at. So I'm going to start, I always start by kind of cutting down through it. And this way, when I go through with my biscuit cutter or my pastry cutter, it's easier for me to cut the butter up because I've already made it into little small squares. And the idea is you want to cut your butter into pieces smaller than a pea so that you'll have those nice flaky layers. If you have big chunks of butter in there, then you're just going to have a big butter pocket in your biscuit. Okay. So we're going to use our pastry cutter, and essentially you're just going to cut down into the flour and the butter, cutting through all of it with the pastry cutter until you have pieces no bigger than a pea. Now, you could always use a food processor for this, but I just find that that's more of a hassle to get all that equipment out and then to clean it up. So a pastry cutter works great, especially if you're just making a single batch of these. You know, it's not that difficult to cut through, and it only takes about a minute, if even. Once you've done about halfway, you're going to go through and you're going to scrape everything out from your blades because the butter does like to get stuck in there. And then we'll give it a couple more cuts. There we go. And I kind of like to do like a kind of a twist move to it. I feel like it cuts it better. There's no scientific evidence to back that up, but for me, it feels like it cuts better. And if you don't have a food processor or a pastry cutter, you could always do it the really old-fashioned way of using 2 butter knives and just cutting like this through the paper. That takes a lot longer, but that's the way they used to do it. Okay. So now we have our butter cut into our mix, and we have no super big chunks. So now we're going to make the wet mixture, and then we're going to add them together, and then we'll do our press and folds. So let me put this over here. Let's grab a bowl out for our wet mixture. We're going to start with a cup of sourdough discard. Give it a little stir. Now, yours can be active if you want. It doesn't have to be complete, discard. If you just have an abundance of extra, you can use that. We're going to feed this afterwards so that we can make some mini loaves tonight. So you need a cup of discard. Here we go. Scrape that all out. And I'll set this over here because we're going to use it to make our rolls. And then we're going to add in a half a cup of half and half. So just think, a half a cup of half and half, a half, a half, a half. And if you don't have half and half, but you do have cream, you could do half milk and half cream. That works well. Or you could do all cream. It will just be a slightly denser biscuit. And milk works fine, but I think it has a better flavor when you use the half and half. Let me get a little fork here, and we're going to mix this up until it's nice and combined. And then we're going to add it to our dry mixture. And mixing it with the milk will allow it to incorporate in better. But again, we're going to have a dry shag, and we're going to do our press and folds, and then we'll cut out our biscuit shapes. So these are cut out biscuits versus like a drop biscuit, but they're going to have just these wonderful flaky layers to it. Okay, we've got our nice wet mixture here, and we're going to add this into our dry mixture using our fork. Make sure I get all of it out. Now again, this will have a really dry shag to it, but we're going to be doing our press and folds to have it come together. And the trick with biscuits, as with scones, is you don't want to overmix it. So you don't want to make it into a paste. What you want to do is you want to really press and fold each of the layers together to make it a really flaky biscuit. And of course, we're going to be serving these biscuits with our chicken. We're going to fry up some chicken. So kind of a nice chicken and biscuit late lunch or brunchy type thing. We had a kind of a soccer games this morning, and then coming home, and Torn was like, "Oh, can I have chicken tenders?" And then I had another one ask, "No, I want biscuits." And I was like, "Well, we can do both. Chicken and biscuits are delicious." So what we're doing is we're folding and pressing, just like when we make scones. These are going to give you those nice flaky layers in it, and that's why you need the cold butter. And you don't want to knead it, because the kneading is going to cause it to turn into like a rock. So just fold and press, and then just take that dry stuff, put it in the middle, fold and press. And this is going to make those flaky layers in your biscuits. And we're going to press it out to about an inch thickness. You don't really want to go much more than an inch. You can go a little bit less, especially if you're making smaller biscuits. But if you go too high, then you're going to dry out your biscuit. Okay. We're going to have our first set will be what I call our pretty biscuits. And then I always, because I don't like to waste any, I always try to cut the the leftover scraps. I kind of press and fold them back together. But they make what I call the Frankenstein biscuits, where they kind of pop and explode every which way. But you can almost see the flaky layers in the biscuits. And when we bake them up, they're going to pop. Let's see. Cut through. I think I can get one out of here. And now here is what I'm going to call my Frankenstein biscuit, because I'm going to try to push them all together, but It always pops up a little bit funky. And then we might have enough to make a little itty bitty biscuit. This can be for Jackie. And he's going to be my super Frankenstein biscuit. You'll look at him when he comes out and he's going to pop every which way. Okay. Then what we're going to do is we're going to brush these with a little bit of half and half on the top, and that's going to give them a nice coat. And then for some of them, I'm going to sprinkle a little bit of sugar over the top so that the ones who want to have them with jelly will have a nice sweet crunch to the top. So just take your half and half. You don't need much, like a tablespoon max. You could use cream or milk with this as well. If you want a shinier top to your biscuit, you can use an egg wash. So we're going to give it a nice little brush. This is going to help give it a nice kind of golden brown. And we're just going to kind of dabble it on. And then we're going to, for some of my biscuits that we're going to serve with like jam, we're going to do it sweet. Just going to take a little bit of sugar and sprinkle it over the top. So we'll do 5 with a little bit of a sweet crunch on them. Okay, now we're going to go pop these in the oven. I have it preheated to 400, and these are going to cook for about 15 minutes. And always I like to place my baked goods on the top rack. I feel like that makes the nicest thing, especially if you have multiple things on there. Baked goods should always go on the top. Let's do for 15 minutes here. My hands are rather dirty, so I'm going to give them a quick wash. And then let's start prepping our chicken. Okay. So before we kind of cut up our chicken and are touching all of that, let's make our dredge for our chicken that we're going to fry up to go with our biscuits. I'm going to start out with about a cup and a bit of flour. And then we're going to put in about a tablespoon of Lowry seasoning salt. This is going to give that salty flavor to our chicken. About a tablespoon of onion powder. This will bring out the savoriness as well. Black pepper for just a little tiny hint of, spice. About a teaspoon. You don't need much. If you like it spicier, you could use some cayenne pepper. That will work out. And then we're going to put about a tablespoon of paprika. The paprika is going to give it a mild savory flavor, but really it's going to give it a really nice golden kind of color when you fry it up. Let's grab a quick fork here. We're just going to stir it up until we've got a nice kind of flavored flour mixture, which we'll dredge our chicken in, and then we'll add some panko breadcrumbs in at the last, after we dredge them. Okay. Just make sure, a lot of times your spices like to hold around in the corners of your bowl, so just make sure you stir them up so that they're equally spread through. I'm doing more of a mild chicken flavor. A lot of times I'll add a bunch more spices in it, but since these are going to go with the biscuits, I don't want like too much of an herby spice for them. Just more of a savory kind of chicken, breading. We're going to start with 3 eggs. I think that should be more than enough for our dredge, or for our egg wash for this. And then you want to make sure you beat them up well. And I will say these eggs are very vibrant. They must have a high diet in omegas. There we go. And just make sure you have all those whites really mixed up, because otherwise sometimes they like connect to your chicken and then you've got a big old snotty piece of egg white on there. Before we do our dredging, I'm going to start heating up our oil. So I'm just going to use some olive oil in here. You don't need to have a huge amount. We're not completely submerging our chicken. We just want it to cook through halfway on each side. So just enough to kind of cover the bottom of your pan. And I'm going to turn it on to a 6 and let it start heating up. Okay, for our chicken, I'm going to cut through it. We're going to give it, I'm going to cut it all the way through to make it thinner. So like you're butterflying your chicken, but we're going to just actually go all the way through. Here we go. And then we'll do the same with this breast over here. This is going to allow your chicken to cook up quicker. And you don't have to necessarily hammer it out to be thinner, because thick pieces of chicken take much longer to fry, and then you're more likely to burn them. So I always like to cut them up, and that way I have just thinner pieces to work with. And then I'm going to make some of these about biscuit to go perfectly on a little biscuit here. And we can cut these 2 in half. There we go. These should be good for our biscuits. We're done with this knife. Now what we're going to do is we're going to dredge all of these first. So put them in this nice seasoned flour. And I will say seasoning the flour is what you've got to do. It's going to give you the most flavor, because this is what sticks to the chicken first. So this is where most of the flavor is going to stay. You know, sometimes when you're frying, you'll lose a little bit of that crispiness. So I always say season up your flour, then add your breadcrumbs. Don't do flour and then spices. There we go. And get this nice and coated for our chicken and biscuits. I know I haven't, I will say the last time I think I had chicken and biscuits when we were like, I think out driving or something like that. We were going out of town and we stopped at Chick-fil-A and we had their chicken and biscuits for breakfast, which are so good. Okay, now we're going to add in about a cup of panko breadcrumbs. This is going to give it a nice crunch. These do have a bit of seasoning to them, so they'll give it a little bit more of a spice to it. But again, I'm trying to keep an overall more of a mild, seasoning flavor on it, because I do want it to be more mellow, since it's going to be more like a brunchy versus a lunchy.
You have a question? Well, why is the panko not in the dredge?
Because if you put the panko in the dredge, it won't stick to the chicken well. So the dredge is what allows the eggs to stick onto it. So it's like a flour coating that really helps the egg hold. So then you can get these nice crumblies and everything on it for the second one. So if you were to try to just dip the chicken into it first without flour on it, the egg would just slide right off. And if you have a bunch of panko crumbs in it, again, that will just fall off because nothing holds it on. Okay, we're gonna into the egg. Make sure it's fully coated, but do you see how it just sticks on there? Lovely. And some people like to do even a super light breading where they just saute it up with the seasoned flour on it. And that gives you a very it's not a true breading, but almost just like a little crust on it. There we go. And I like to make sure I kind of pat my stuff down onto the chicken. It helps the crumbs stay on better. But you see how bigger they get once you bread them? They actually they grow in size. I know sometimes I think I've cut my chicken the perfect size, and then after we breaded everything, it's like massive. Okay, just 3 more to go. And then we can start frying them up, because I bet you the oil will be ready there. Then we can prep our rolls for tonight. We're going to be doing This is one of the few times I actually know what I'm cooking for dinner tonight. We're going to be doing steak and baked potatoes and rolls and broccoli for dinner tonight. And my kids are trying to get me to make another dessert, even though we made brownies last night. My oldest daughter was like, can you make me a brookie? And I'm like, we just had brownies. That's like the same thing with cookies added. And I was like, we'll see. Maybe. My kids always are wanting desserts. There we go. And I will say, at least the good thing with desserts in this house is we're feeding so many that they don't last very long. And there's not like an overabundance of it. Here we go. And we've got these up. So let me just clean up this area and then we'll do our drip test in our oil to see if it's nice and hot. So let me get my hands debreaded. I always say keep one hand clean when you're working with the breading because it is hard to do something with your both hands are dirty. Okay, let's do our drip test. I just add a little bit of water in. If it sizzles right away, boom, it is ready. Let's grab our tongs. And we're going to put our first ones in. Now, you always want to make sure your oil is warm enough. And once it's hot, I turn it down to about a 5 because I want it to cook slower. I don't want the oil to keep getting hotter. I'm trying to grab all of my thicker cuts first. There we go. And we're going to let those saute up. And while those are not saute, fry up are cooking, we are going to make our rolls for tonight. Just let me clean up a little bit of this mess.
You have a question? Did you get a little sun this weekend?
Yes, I did. We had a soccer game yesterday, and it said it was going to be cloudy and nice, and it was not. My husband did stand and block most of the sun for me, but I got like one strip right up here on my forehead. You should see his legs. They're so burned. And of course I didn't think to grab sunscreen because it was like 60 degrees. It wasn't even that, and it was cloudy, a chance of rain. Well, clearly that was not the case. Let me get all of my ingredients over here. Okay, so these are like the favorite rolls that I make. So they're like sourdough rolls with a touch of yeast. So when I say a touch, all they have is a half a teaspoon of yeast. And it just gives the sourdough enough of a kick to kind of spring up. And these, what you make them now, and they rise all day for about the next like 6 or so hours. And then you bake them up. So you have to have a starter that's been fed, within the last 24 hours. So I fed mine last night. But this is 3/4 cup of warm milk. And then I added a half a teaspoon of yeast in it. And now we're going to add 1/4 cup of sugar. And we're going to let that foam for just a second. And let me give it a good stir. So I will say this yeast gives it a nice little touch, but these are very soft and pillowy sourdough rolls that have the chewish kind of crust on the outside, but it's a tender chewy, but a really like pillowy inside. They're definitely one of our favorites here. Okay, let's get the rest of this working together. We need it's a 1/3 cup of sourdough active starter. So the goal is your starter has to be fed in the last 24 hours. I like it, I fed mine last night. So that's typically what I do, or I'll feed it in the morning and we'll do it for the afternoon one. But you need it to be, you can't have it be dead, you know what I mean? Or begging for a feeding. So we're going to put this in here, scrape all of that out. go. Let's keep that in there because we're going to have to feed this guy so we can make our starters. But let's check on our chicken here. Perfect. Nice, kind of a golden one. These two might need a little bit longer. But here's our fried chicken, and we did a kind of a savory breading on it, but not too herby because we want it to kind of mend well with the biscuits. This is 1/4 cup of butter, so a 1/2 stick melted. We're going to add that into our 1/3 cup of sourdough discard, and then we're going to add in 1 egg. We're going to mix these up until they're all the way. There we go. Perfect. Then we're going to add in 1½ teaspoons of salt. So it's about 1 1/2. Give it a nice mix. Then we're going to add our warm milk, yeast, and sugar back in here to make our wet mix. But let's get these guys flipped. These two I think are ready now. Perfect. They smell delicious. They have that just kind of country fried smell to them. There we go. Now we're going to add our yeast and our milk and the sugar back into this. Now you don't need to wait for your whole yeast to bloom. You want to just see a little blooming action so that you know that it is alive.
You have a few questions all about what is the starter and what's in the starter.
So yes, starter is what you use to make sourdough. It's the rising agent in it. And really it is just fermented flour. So flour and water that have been sitting on your counter fermenting, and you feed it every day or every other day. If you are interested in doing the sourdough journey, I do have videos uploaded on the link on our page where you can create your own sourdough and how to feed your starter and how to, you need to feed your starter for about 7 days before you can use it to make sourdough. Look at these gorgeous biscuits. Beautiful. Let me turn this off.
And you're about to restart.
Yes, I am about to start a new sourdough starter. I'm going to make a chocolate starter, which has cocoa powder in it, which is a richer starter that you can use for like chocolate sourdough bread and chocolate stuff. But here, these are my sourdough discard biscuits. So we use our discard from our starter to make them. And then you'll see all the lovely folded layers in them. We did a little sugar crust on some. These, I told you, are my Frankenstein, where you have to patch them back together. They don't look as beautiful as the first ones, but they are delicious. And we're going to be having these with our chicken and biscuits. Let's check on my chicken here. Ooh, these are just about ready. So before we mix that up, let me get out a baking sheet, and then I'm going to line it with some paper towels. This is key to keeping your chicken crispy and not getting soggy. If it sits in its own grease, the crispiness goes away. So we're going to put this right here. You see it lovely. I always put the grease side down. That way it just it crisps up nicely. There we go. And then let's throw in our last bit. But these are going to be our breaded chicken for our chicken and biscuits. Here. I'll fry these guys up. But again, these are going to be so delicious. Let's pop this over here. And let's finish up making our things. So we added our milk and our yeast to our egg and discard mixture. You want to just mix it all the way up.
What's in the breading for the chicken?
The breading for the chicken is just flour, paprika, onion powder, Lowry seasoning, salt, and black pepper. And then after we dredge it, we add some more panko breadcrumbs in. We are going to add 3 cups of bread flour to our rolls. And so you want to use unbleached bread flour, because if you use bleached flour, your sourdough won't rise well, because the bleaching has killed all of the natural occurring yeast in it. We're going to mix this up. Here we go. I finally got myself a couple new dough whisks. I had one and it broke, and I kept gluing it back together, and then it kept breaking, and I was like, okay, it's time to invest in a nice new one. So we're seeing, this is the first time I've used this one. Seeing how it works. I also got another one looked kind of cool, but I wasn't sure if it was going to be as functional. There we go. So now we kind of have a nice little shag to this. Take out all of your little stuff. There we go. And then I'm going to dump this out, and we're going to give this a good knead. Now, this is the kneading part, is the crucial part to having soft, pillowy rolls. If you don't knead it enough, they're going to be stiff because you haven't developed the gluten in your rolls. It's the same thing with, bread. So I'm going to knead it really well. And then just like you do with regular sourdough bread, you're going to knead this like every 15 minutes for the next hour, for just a few minutes at a time. And that's just going to help develop the gluten. And then what you're going to do is you're going to let it rise until about an hour before you want to bake it. That's when you're going to shape it into 12 rolls, and you're going to put it in a like a 9 by 13 pan with a little space between them, and then you'll let them rise again. And then you're going to have just these delicious pillowy rolls. There we go. So again, we're really like working in the stretching and the pulling of this. And this is going to develop the gluten. And then we'll do it again every 15 minutes. And the reason why you do that is the dough, the flour hydrates. And so you want to, as it's hydrating, you want to stretch it and really work on those gluten chains and building them. So we're going to let this set for about 15 minutes. Let's check on our chicken here. A little bit. This one's ready. I always say one side of my pan always cooks a little bit faster than the other. So those two need a little bit more. While we're doing that, I'm going to give my hands a quick wash, and we're just going to prep up our mini fruit salad. So I got to do my grocery shopping soon. So as I say, I'm always grocery shopping. I feel like when we're feeding between 9 to 11 mouths most days, we are always grocery shopping. So give them a quick rinse. We're just going to use up. This is our pineapple we cut up the other day. We had a little bit left. So we're going to add some strawberries and then some clementines to it. So we have just kind of a simple fruit salad to go with our chicken and biscuits, which will be yummy. And plus, we don't want a super huge meal. This is to hold us off. We're going to be doing steaks, and that's everyone's favorite in our house tonight. They've been begging for steaks recently. So, it's funny how, like, they get in a kick. They were begging and begging for spaghetti and meatballs. So they were super excited last night. They even told me that their jumbo meatballs are their favorite. Hadn't made the jumbo meatballs in a while. But last night, they all loved them. They thought it was, like, hilarious. And so then, like, Lena, my older daughter, she sent me a text. Can we have steak? When can we have steak? I feel like we haven't had steak in a while. And I'm like, okay, I guess we can have steak. I had actually bought steak, to have for the menu for the week at one time. Because at Costco, you can buy those big packs of steaks. And so it's like a 5-pack, but it's like 6 pounds of steak. So I'll use up like 3 for a steak dinner. And then the other 2 are really great for like a stir fry. So we'll do that as well this week. We'll throw this in here and then we'll be ready to plate up. Okay, excited for these. These biscuits look delicious. I always love it when my Frankenstein ones don't look that bad, you know? Sometimes I don't push them hard enough together and they get pretty Frankenstein-y. Or Frankenstein's monster. I remember I was corrected last time. There we go. So, simple fruit salad, easy peasy lemon squeezy. But it's funny, if I don't prep my fruit for my kids, they'll never eat it. But if I prep it and put it in a bowl for them, they're like, ooh, delicious. Well, let's get a plate out. Let's get ready. Let's see if these guys are ready to come out too. Just about. This guy's ready. Okay, we'll let those sit for a second. Okay, so today we will have our fruit salad. Fruit salad, yummy, yummy. Fruit salad. And then look at the layers on this sourdough biscuit. So we're going to break it in half. Flaky layers. Boom. And now you have delicious chicken and biscuits and a fruit salad. What? Can you ask for more on a Sunday? Well, guys, thank you so much for joining us here today. I like to show you guys what we're cooking, making for our family. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I try to do live cooking shows every single day, show you what we're making, whatnot. We do also have a membership that you can get that allows you access to extra videos and exclusive lives and whatnot. So feel free to check that out if you want to. But again, thank you so much for joining us. Don't forget to like and subscribe.